Good morning. I am Yancy. Welcome to my kitchen. This morning we are going to make another batch of buttermilk biscuits. I know I have already made a video on how to make my buttermilk biscuits, but I've changed my technique a little bit and I wanted to walk you through the new technique. This is not to say that the first video is no longer accurate. You can absolutely make wonderful biscuits using that video. I've just tweaked it a little bit and I just wanted to walk you through it. I'm about to be a guest at someone's house and I want to take some wonderful buttermilk biscuits as a gift, and I just wanted to pass that on to you. What a great housewarming or house guest gift buttermilk biscuits or any homemade bread product is. Everyone always appreciates it. So today I've already got my 2 cups of self-rising flour in my bowl. Now, some people have asked me about my use of self-rising flour. You absolutely can use all-purpose flour, but if you do, you will need to add to your 2 cups of all-purpose flour, you will need to add 1 tablespoon baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, and 1 teaspoon salt. The reason for the baking soda is because these are buttermilk biscuits, and buttermilk is very acidic, and the baking soda kind of tempers the acid in the buttermilk a little bit, but you can still get that great tang. Okay, so I've got my 2 cups of the self-rising flour, which is what I prefer. I've already grated some of my butter into the flour, but I wanted to leave a little bit to remind you of my favorite grating technique. This requires an entire stick of butter. So I've already grated everything with this. This is just one of the flat cheese graters that everyone has. And you just grate it, and it just works so well. To me, it's just so much easier than getting out the food processor or doing it with the pastry knife. Now, it is vitally important that your butter be cold. I've even done this with frozen butter. It takes longer to grate, it's harder to grate, but it can be done. But it absolutely must be cold. And the reason being is because you want it to melt in the oven and create steam, which is what gives it that lovely loft. So I've got my 1 stick of butter in here. And now I take my hands and mix this around so that every little piece of butter is coated with flour. It starts to resemble sort of Parmesan cheese or cornmeal. I'm just gonna make sure every little bit. And then I make a well in the center of my flour. And I forgot to get the buttermilk out of the refrigerator. There's always something with me. Okay, here we go. Thank goodness it's not that far away. So I'm going to use almost a cup of buttermilk, which is one difference. I used to tell you to use 3/4 of a cup, and I have since decided that a little more buttermilk actually in my mind, makes the biscuits a little moister. So I go a little bit heavier on the buttermilk. And I will tell you that the kinds of flour that you use, some flours absorb liquid better than others. So you really, over time, you experiment with the buttermilk flour ratio until you come up with something that you like. So I've got my almost 1 cup of buttermilk in there. And I incorporate this with this little rubber spatula, which is my friend. And I don't want to overwork the dough. If you overwork biscuit dough, you'll get tough biscuits. I think I mentioned that before. I hope I did. And you want to work fairly quickly because you want this butter to stay cold. So I'm trying not to touch it with my hands, as you can see. I'm using this rubber spatula. And it's a very shaggy dough. You're gonna think, oh my goodness, it certainly doesn't look anything like bread dough. It's very loose, very shaggy, but that's okay. I can't believe I just did that. I broke my spatula. It was a perfectly clean break, but oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll be editing that out. Let's get rid of that. Okay, now thankfully I was almost done there, so Let me, don't know my own strength, I guess. Wow, I've been working out. So, move that. Now you can see how shaggy this dough is. It's hardly holding together, but it will when I start working with it a little bit with my hands. So, just gonna try and get it into a ball. Again, working quickly so I don't warm it up with my hands. Now here's where it gets a little different. I'm going to take my rolling pin and roll it out. Let's see. I need a little flour on my rolling pin here. It's a little sticky. Let's flour this. Roll it out, and then it's still a little sticky. And then I want to fold this in on itself a few times, and that is going to help it have layers, you see. Get a little more flour on here. That looked like a lot, didn't it? But really, it's not that much. So I'm going to do that technique one more time. And let me show you exactly what I did. I rolled it, I folded it in on itself once that way, and then I'm going to fold it in on itself once that way. So I've got it, I basically have 4 layers now. And so one last time, I'm going to flatten this out to about 1 inch, I would say. And then let me show you another technique, which is to see if I can get this into something that more resembles a rectangle than an oval. I'm going to use my chef's knife for this, but you can use a bench scraper if you have one. I'm going to use my chef's knife, and I think it's a little tall, so let me give it one more go with this. And let's do this again. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm not going to use a biscuit cutter this time. I'm actually going to cut these with this knife. And I will tell you why. It is because I used to think that after you cut the dough, you always when you're working with rounds, you've always got some left over. And I used to think, well, you can just rework that as many times as it takes to use all the dough. And I've since discovered that, again, it's the less you work your dough, the more tender your biscuits are. So the great thing about this technique is you have absolutely no waste. How cool is that? Okay, so I'm gonna first cut it this direction. I've cut it into 4 slices, and then I'm going to go 3 this way. No waste, look at that. So now I'm going to take my pan, and I like to lay my biscuits right up next to one another. Some people like to give their biscuits some room, and so that they get brown on all sides. I prefer keeping them snuggled up with each other so that they don't actually get brown on all sides, that they stay just brown on the top and on the bottom. They stay kind of white on the sides, but that's my preference. You can do it your way. So now I've got these. So let me go get my melted butter, which is my next thing I want to do. This is just probably about a tablespoon of melted butter. I like to use salted butter, but you can use unsalted if you like. And I'm going to make certain I get each and every biscuit. A couple of these are a little misshapen because they were the ones on the end, but they're going to be delicious too. So I've used all of that, and now I'm going to take my everything mix, and the tops. And you've seen me use the chef's technique where you sprinkle from on high. I don't really want to broadcast this all over my my kitchen today or all over my baking sheet. So I'm gonna keep my fingers a little closer to my biscuits. And I like to use lots of my mix, but you use the amount that you want. Look at that, there you go. Now I'm gonna bake these in a 400-degree oven for 15 minutes. Now, as I've probably mentioned before, every oven is different, and you may find that 14 and a half minutes is just right, or even 20 minutes is just right. You're going to have to check until you get used, and eventually once you've made 2 or 3 batches of biscuits, you'll know, and then you won't have to keep checking anymore. Now, I wanted to show you, I did make some biscuits before I started this video. I made another batch just so you can see how beautiful they are. These, I used my biscuit cutter and I made them round, as you can see. But I want to show you, this is what happens. You get so much more, in my opinion. They're so much flakier, and I think it's from that technique where I'm folding it in on itself and giving it these wonderful, look, I can even peel this layer off here. Oh, let's see how wonderful they are. Oh, are so good and tender and wonderful. So, thank you so much for joining me. I'll make another batch of delicious buttermilk biscuits. I appreciate your stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you make these biscuits. Bye!